Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Tomatoes are by far the favorite vegetable that folks grow in their sustainable urban gardens across Europe. Second place is not even close really. In fact, they are so popular that I would say tomatoes are probably the most popular vegetable to grow in gardens around the world. But despite their popularity, tomatoes can be quite challenging to grow. I have made every tomato growing mistake in the book myself. And on today's video, I'm going to share 5 tomato growing mistakes that I would never make again, in the hope that I can share my experience with you so you will not have to learn these things the hard way. If you are new to the channel, please subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, and check out the links in the video description for everything I use in my garden and some lovely custom apparel and gear. Mistake number 1 is not removing the lowest sets of leaves underneath the first flower cluster of your tomato plants. These leaves are usually used to break through the surface of the ground when the tomato seeds germinate, and then to provide the initial photosynthesis that the tomato plants need to grow tall. But after a certain point, all of these leaves do is become a magnet for disease. Because tomato plants usually get diseases from irrigation water or rainfall splashing on the ground, and then splashing that soil, which contains pathogens, onto the undersides of these lowest leaves. So once we plant them out into our urban gardens, they become virtually useless for the tomato plant and only serve as a source of disease. The internet has unfortunately taught gardeners to prune tomato plants too aggressively and hack them to pieces. I try to stay away from that and be very conservative with my pruning because the leaves of the tomato plant absorb solar energy for photosynthesis, and they also help shade and protect the fruit of your plants. So it is very important that we do not remove too many. However, the lowest leaves on the plant serve a lot less purpose and cause more harm than good. If you take a look at this example with a dwarf tomato plant, you will notice that the lowest flower cluster is right there. Now, these lower leaves once did serve a purpose because these were the initial leaves that provided the photosynthesis for the plant to get this tall. But now, they do not really do anything beneficial to the plant. They do not shade out the flower clusters, and they do not provide much photosynthesis because they are so low on the main stem. All they really are is a magnet for pests and disease. So whether you are growing an indeterminate, determinate, or a dwarf tomato, you can remove all of these leaves here because all they are going to do is collect splashing from the soil. Let us cut all of these off. In simply doing that, we are going to increase the airflow at the base of the plant, and we are going to make it less likely that soil is going to splash in heavy rainfall or during irrigation onto the undersides of the leaves, which will help with disease resistance. So regardless of what kind of tomato plant you are growing, this is a really good idea to do. Now, one thing that has become very popular is removing the lower leaves on our tomato plants prior to transplanting. And the theory is, because tomato plants have the ability to send roots out along the stems, if we pinch off these leaf nodes and bury the tomato plant extra deep, it will sprout an advanced root system, more advanced than if you just plant the initial root ball. And there is no big deal to doing so, because the first flowers are not going to form until up here anyway. So we can preemptively remove all of these branches. And while that is fine to do, one mistake that gardeners make is that they remove these branches at the time of transplanting. And that can create a problem because you are creating open wounds in the stems of the tomato before you transplant them. And that becomes an entry point for soil-borne diseases. So what you actually want to do is you want to remove these lower branches several days before transplant. That way, we can allow these open wounds to heal over. So please do not remove all of these branches at the time of transplant. Do it a few days beforehand. That way, you allow the stem to fully heal and you will not have an open entry wound for any soil-borne diseases. Mistake number 2 that gardeners often make is that they are under-fertilizing their tomato plants. Your tomato plants should be fertilized at least once every 2 weeks, or 2 times a month roughly. And this often comes as a surprise to people. Why do I have to fertilize my tomato plants so much? Well, that is because vegetable gardens are not sustainable systems on their own. They are not like forests. They cannot survive without human intervention, and they require more from the soil over time than they give back to the soil. Forests consist of thousands of different organisms. They consist of canopy trees, mid-level trees, understory bushes and vines. They have support ground covers that fix nitrogen. And every year, and all throughout the year, the various canopy trees are dropping leaves and chunks of bark, and all of those things are re-nourishing the soil. So it is a sustainable system that puts back what it takes out. Not so with a vegetable garden. If you leave your vegetable garden for 3 months and come back, there is probably going to be nothing left. We all struggle if we have gardens to leave anywhere in the summer because they require maintenance. So it is very important that we put the nutrients back into the soil that the plants take out because tomato plants are heavy feeders. My tomato fertilizing routine consists of a 3-step process that I do at transplant and then every 2 weeks roughly. And I do this for not just my tomato plants, but my squash, my cucumbers, my peppers, my watermelons, and other things in the nightshade and cucurbit family. And the first part of the system is a good quality, all-purpose, granular organic fertilizer. You want a granular organic fertilizer somewhere around a 555 NPK. This plant tone is a 533. That is close enough. As long as all three of the numbers are relatively close together and all represented, it will be just fine. Step 2 is an organic bone meal product. This is made out of dehydrated bone that is ground up into a fine powder, which then adds the nutrients and minerals inside the bone into the soil. And this is an excellent source of phosphorus and calcium. Phosphorus is important for the flowering and fruiting cycle. It also builds strong roots, and all of that calcium helps build strong roots and also prevents blossom end rot on your fruits. As long as you are irrigating properly and you give the plants even moisture, then once they are applied, I like to water everything in with a fish fertilizer or a seaweed extract. This is an organic source of macronutrients and micronutrients for your plants. It is probably my favorite of the water-soluble fertilizers. So as I said, every 2 weeks you will want to give all of the plants roughly 1.5 tablespoons of the all-purpose granular organic, about half a tablespoon of the bone meal, and then you will water that all in with the fish fertilizer. You will apply the fish fertilizer at a rate of about 2 to 3 tablespoons per gallon. And 1 gallon of water should be enough for about 5 to 6 plants, depending on how large they are. You can probably water a dozen plants in per gallon at transplant time, but when they start getting larger throughout the season, you will have to give them more fertilizer. A gallon of water will probably only take care of about 5 to 6 plants. Eventually, they may get so large that a gallon of fertilizer will only take care of 3 to 4 plants. But you will figure that out over time. And like I said, I do the same method at transplant and then every 2 weeks throughout the season. The fertilizer routine I just gave you is a 100% organic fertilizer routine that I believe produces optimal results, at least the best results that I have ever had. That being said, if you are not looking for 100% organic, or maybe you cannot afford to be 100% organic, one of the things you can substitute is, instead of using fish fertilizer, which I think is the best, but if you need to cut cost somewhere, you can use something like a balanced organic feed. Now, no matter what you do, I strongly recommend that the foundation of your fertilizing routine is a granular, all-purpose fertilizer such as this, because granular organic fertilizers add nutrients to the soil and feed the soil microbiome, the fungi and the bacteria in the soil. If all you give them is water-soluble products, you are not going to be feeding the soil, and your soil will deplete over time. So, please make the organic fertilizer the foundation of your routine no matter what. Then, if you need to cut costs, you can use a balanced feed. Or you can mix it 50-50 with some fish fertilizer, something like that. The point I am trying to make is that no matter who you are or what you can afford, I want you to garden in your backyard or balcony. Do not believe anybody that tells you that you have to be 100% organic. If it is too big of a barrier to entry for you, just do the best you can. Anything you grow in your urban garden is going to be better than anything you get at the supermarket. And if you are curious where to get any of these fertilizer products, I will place direct links to them down in the video description for your convenience. Mistake number 3 is something that I alluded to earlier in the video, and it is probably the most common mistake that tomato growers are making right now. And this is over-pruning their plants. Pruning may be the most controversial topic in all of tomato culture, but let us start with the least controversial point. If you are growing determinate or dwarf tomatoes, do not prune them beyond what I showed you in step 1. These tomatoes grow as bushes, and they grow to a predetermined height of only a few feet. They do not grow indefinitely. So if you remove suckers and leaves from the plants, you are removing the plant ability to fruit, and it will not recover from the error and grow out of it. The only leaves you should remove from determinate or dwarf tomato plants are the leaves below that first flower cluster within a few inches of the ground, to maximize airflow and prevent leaf branches from dragging on the ground or accumulating soil splashing like I showed you in mistake number 1. That is it. Now for indeterminate tomatoes, which are the types of tomatoes that most gardeners are growing in the largest quantities in their urban plots. Indeterminate tomatoes are natural vines that should be allowed to grow and branch out quite freely in our gardens. They are supposed to snake their way up supports, just like they would in the wild under forest canopies. The main reason many of us prune them is simply for size control, especially in small urban gardens or on balconies where space is limited. This is a tomato sucker, forming at an angle along the main stem of the plant. If you let that sucker continue to develop, it will become a whole new main stem with its own leaves, flowers, and fruit. Allowing more suckers to grow means your plant will produce more flowers and ultimately more tomatoes overall. Unfortunately, lots of advice on the internet encourages gardeners to remove every single sucker and train the plant to a single stem. This single stem approach actually comes from commercial greenhouse production, where they use very tall structures and grow plants very close together in controlled conditions. In our European backyard or balcony setups, we usually cannot support plants that tall, and we do not have the same protected environment. Allowing some lateral growth and branching can actually help maximize your harvest within the height limits of our supports and trellises. It is perfectly fine to remove some suckers if the plant is becoming too large for your infrastructure, or to improve airflow, especially in humid British or Northern European summers. Always have a clear reason for every prune you make, such as preventing the plant from falling over or reducing disease risk in wet weather. Pruning damages the plant slightly and stresses it, so do not prune just for the sake of it. Mistake number 4 is planting your tomato plants too late in the spring, particularly if you are in a region with hot summers. We all know the risks of planting too early with late frosts, but planting too late can be just as problematic in warmer parts of Europe. Tomato plants have trouble with pollination when daytime temperatures regularly exceed 32 degrees Celsius and nights stay above 21 degrees. The pollen becomes clumpy, and the flowers simply drop off without setting fruit. In southern European cities or during heat waves, this can ruin your harvest if the plants only start flowering in the peak heat. Try to plant early enough so that your tomatoes can establish flower and begin setting fruit before the intense summer heat arrives. This is especially important on balconies, where reflected heat from walls can make conditions even warmer. Mistake number 5 that many gardeners make is not using shade cloth to protect their tomato plants during the height of summer sun. Contrary to what some labels say, tomatoes actually prefer dappled light rather than full, intense sun all day. They originally grew as vines under forest canopies in South America, so they are not fully adapted to being blasted with hours of direct sunlight. Using shade cloth allows us to give them full sun in the spring for fast growth when the sun is less intense, and then provide protection as summer progresses. This reduces stress on the plants, lowers disease pressure, and can extend your harvest by several weeks. In urban European gardens, where space is at a premium and we often deal with unpredictable weather, this simple technique can make a big difference. I recommend starting with 40% shade cloth for most areas, unless you are in a very hot southern spot where you might need more. Install it above your plants once the UV index rises, usually from late May or early June, depending on your location. That covers the 5 mistakes I would never make again when growing tomatoes in sustainable urban settings. I am really pleased to be sharing more about tomatoes, as it means the gardening season is getting underway across Europe. Many of us are preparing our raised beds, containers, and balcony gardens right now, and it is such an exciting time. I hope this helps you avoid some common pitfalls and grow a better crop this year in your own space. If you found this useful, please give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you do not miss future videos. Drop any questions about growing tomatoes in the comments below, and I will do my best to